The gospel is taken from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I'm dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the word of God for the people of God.
Seated. Will you bow with me for a moment of prayer? O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. And let all God's people say, Amen. So the journey to forgiving other people begins with the experience of being forgiven. You can't do what you have never seen done. You can't give to others what you've never received. And so last Sunday, I suggested that the message of the first half of Jesus' parable of the prodigal son is something like this. Whatever you have done, however far off you may have wandered, the God of love is running to meet you with arms wide open and with a heart filled with joy. Won't you receive the forgiveness that God so freely offers? You see, I think if you'll just let God hold you in his arms of mercy and forgiveness, maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to offer that mercy and forgiveness to somebody else. So the journey to forgiving others begins with this experience of being forgiven. But it's not that easy, is it? Sooner or later, the journey to forgiving others always passes through this one hard question. And that question is, well, why should I forgive him? Why should I forgive her? I mean, even if she said she was sorry, which, by the way, she has not, it's still, well, she doesn't deserve my forgiveness. And, he keeps bringing up all this stuff he thinks I did years ago. Why shouldn't I remind him of the stuff that he has done? And even if I forgive her, there's no guarantee that's going to change her in any meaningful way. Why should I forgive? Well, that's the point of the second half of Jesus' parable of the prodigal son. That's the question that the older brother in the story was wrestling with. I mean, you know the story. We just heard it, that a man had two sons, and the younger son, the younger brother, had the audacity, really the disrespect, to ask his father for his share of the inheritance early, while his father was still alive. He asked for his inheritance, and then he took his share of the money, and he went far off, and he wasted it. He blew it all. God knows the sorts of stuff he spent it on, liquor and gambling and prostitutes, terrible stuff. And then when the money finally ran out, and he didn't have anywhere else to go, well, then he comes crawling back home, right? And our dad doesn't even ask him where he's been. Dad doesn't punish him in any way. Dad doesn't even kind of give him a grace period to try to earn back our trust. No, Dad just right away gives him a robe and a ring. Dad just right away calls the caterer and throws this great big party and expects us all to be happy. Meantime, I have worked my butt off for that man every day of my life. I have never taken a vacation, never had a sick day, never broke so much as one little rule. Dad can forgive that idiot if he wants to, but why should I forgive? Do you see how easy it is to sympathize with the older brother? In other words, do you see how easy it is to sympathize with not forgiving? So since that question, why should I forgive, it probably occurs to almost all of us, doesn't it? Well, let me offer some possible answers to that question. Why should I forgive? Well, first of all, simply, Jesus tells us to, right? He commands us to forgive, and not just once, not just 2 or 3 times. You remember how often Jesus says we have to forgive our brothers and sisters? You remember, don't you? As many as 70 times 7. I'll wait for you to get out your calculator. That's a lot of times, isn't it? Jesus actually builds this into the prayer he taught us, right? He says, Father, forgive us our trespasses, not just willy-nilly, not just automatically. We pray, Father, forgive our trespasses. How? As we forgive those who trespass against us. We say it every Sunday. I wonder if we really mean it. And then from the cross, Jesus demonstrates this kind of forgiveness about the people who were in the process of putting him to death unjustly. Jesus prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So forgiving others, you see, is not a suggestion. It's not one option among many for Christians. Forgiving others is not something that only the saints can aspire to. Forgiving other people is at the heart of our faith. It's part of what we have to do as followers of Jesus. So why should I forgive? Well, for one thing, because Jesus says so. Here's another one. Why should I forgive? Deep inside, I think we all know that life together in community requires forgiveness, doesn't it? What friendship, what family, what congregation can survive for long without some forgiveness? I wonder if you've ever had an experience something like this Maybe not exactly, but something like this. Two people, could be spouses, could be siblings, could be friends. Two people are seated on the same sofa, but as far apart from each other as they can get. Or maybe as far apart in the same house as they can get. Or maybe as far apart on this planet as they can get. And they're both turned away from the other, and they both have their arms crossed, and they both have a scowl on their face, and they're both saying, well, this time they have to say they're sorry first. This time they have to make the first move. And there they sit, and sit, and sit. And nobody can get anything done. Nothing new can happen because they're both too stubborn, because nobody will reach out and make the first move. And here's the thing. If you stop and think about it, there is literally no way out of that situation other than forgiveness. It's the only option there is. And so life together, and in friendships, in churches, in families, it simply requires forgiveness. And if that's true at kind of the local, the interpersonal level, it's even more true at the larger level, at the national level, at the international level, dare I say it, at the denominational level. Because mercy, a little tolerance of each other, is the only alternative there is to a vicious and unlivable kind of world. And the truth is, in some places, in some ways, we've already got that, don't we? We have a vicious and unlivable kind of world. You remember I referred a few weeks ago to the famous statement often attributed to Gandhi, who said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That is, always getting back at somebody. Well, it leaves the whole world blind and toothless, right? That's what it does. After apartheid ended in South Africa, lots of people were worried that there would just be a great bloodbath, that after years of violent and horrible oppression, the black people would just rise up and kill the white people. And one of the main people who prevented that from happening was Bishop Desmond Tutu, right? And his phrase was this. He has a book by this name. He said, there is no future. There is literally no future for our country without forgiveness. Life together requires that we forgive one another. Why should I forgive? Well, I wonder if you are aware of this. Did you know that forgiving others is good for your health? Did you know that? It's literally true. And in the book that we're doing the Lenten study on, very briefly, the authors refer to some research. They cite some statistics that show that people who are more forgiving have fewer health and mental problems. They have fewer physical symptoms due to stress. They're healthier, in other words. And I heard on NPR, it's been several years ago, I went back and tried to find it. I couldn't find the exact broadcast, but here's what it said. It said that the prevalence of angry, unforgiving tweets coming from a certain geographical area is correlated, it's associated with a higher rate of heart attacks in that same geographical area. And it went on to say that since not everybody, but most people who use Twitter are younger people, it's probably not the people who are making those unforgiving, angry tweets who are actually having the heart attacks, which means that our forgiveness or our lack of forgiveness affects not only our own health, it affects the health of the people around us. It affects the health of the whole community. So why should I forgive? Well, I think those are some important and compelling reasons. We forgive for the sake of Jesus. We forgive for the sake of our friendships and our families and our congregations. We forgive for the sake of our health and the people around us. All good. But here's the reason I want to lift up most of all. Bishop Tutu in the book that we're reading says this, that we do not forgive primarily for other people. We forgive primarily for our own sake. He says that forgiving others is the highest form of self-interest. And so when I forgive you, it's actually a gift that gives itself to me. I deeply believe that forgiveness of others is the best thing we can do for ourselves. And here's a couple of reasons, and at the end maybe a third reason why I think that is true. Why should I forgive others, and why is forgiving others a gift to myself? Well, because like air and water and food and love, forgiveness is a necessity of life. At least it's a necessity for life with any kindness and joy and vitality in it. D.D. Risher says that any probing of the meaning of forgiveness must take into account human need, that we need to be forgiven, and we need to forgive other people. And she says that forgiveness is not just an ethical instruction. It's not just a magnanimous gesture that we might make. She says it is a spiritual necessity. And here's why. Because if we hold on to our anger, if we hold on to our grudges and our resentment, it will not only make us unpleasant to the people around us, I mean, it will certainly do that, but it will eat you up from the inside out. She says, I get it. I have been in times of my life when I have been unable to forgive somebody for a period of time. She says, so I would never say to somebody, you have to forgive that person right now. At the same time, she says, however much you have been wronged, however justified your anger and your hurt may be, if you nurse that grudge, if you cherish your hatred, it will poison you. It'll poison you. That hatred, she says, is a demon that needs to be cast out, and that we simply have to pray for the ability to forgive other people. You know, I know that when somebody has hurt us, when somebody has hurt us deeply, we just naturally have this reaction, oh yeah, even if I don't literally strike out and hurt you, I'll show you, I'm going to stay mad at you for the rest of my life. I'm going to give you a bad look, every time I see you, or I'm going to give you the silent treatment. I'll never talk to you again. And you can do that if you want. But here's the thing. Maybe the other person will just ignore you. Or maybe they don't care that you're not going to talk to them. Worse yet, maybe they won't even notice all of your carefully planned fuming and frowning and all of this bad treatment you're going to give them. So who are you hurting? Well, not the other person. You're only hurting yourself. Until you can let all of that go, until you can forgive, here's the point. You are giving that other person, you are giving the person who hurt you the power to decide your feelings, the power to decide who you will be in relationship and who you won't be. You're giving them the power to determine whether you can be happy or not. Wouldn't you want to rather decide that for yourself? Forgiving other people is a way of taking back emotional control of your own life. You get to decide, not the person who has hurt you. Forgiving others is a gift you give to yourself. So again, why is it that forgiving others is really a gift to ourselves? Well, I'm going to talk more about this in a couple of Sundays, but forgiving others is really the way that we are healed, because forgiving others is the process of letting go of our pain. It's the process of kind of airing out our grievance, of working through our grief. It's a way of letting God's healing and calmness come into our own hearts. Again, Bishop Tutu says, in our own way, all of us are broken, and it's out of our brokenness that we hurt other people. And so he says forgiveness is the journey towards healing the broken parts. It is the way that we are made whole again. Wouldn't you like to be made whole again? One of my favorite preachers is an Episcopalian woman, Barbara Brown Taylor, and she wrote an article years ago about hell houses. Do you know about hell houses? At Halloween time, they're kind of an alternative to haunted houses, and they're run by evangelical churches. And I guess the point is to kind of try to scare teenagers into behaving the way these churches want them to behave. And so in a hell house, rather than ghosts and goblins and all that, they have rooms that portray the punishments, the torments that they believe God gives to people who commit what they take to be the worst of sins: premarital sex, and drug use, and Satan worship, and all that sort of stuff. Well, kind of tongue-in-cheek, Barbara Taylor suggests some other kinds of rooms that might be in hell houses if these churches would pay attention to other parts of the Bible. And so, for example, she says there's the resisting evildoers room, where people are punished for striking back at criminals rather than turning the other cheek the way that Jesus commanded us to. It's in the Bible, right? You've read it. She also proposes a room called the Rich Man and Lazarus room, where people receive eternal torment for living comfortable lives while other people have been hungry and homeless. I mean, the story's in the Bible. You've read it. But I think the most intriguing room that she suggests is the older brother room. And in this room, there is a very respectable but intensely unhappy guy. He's wearing a t-shirt that says, "I'm the good son." And he puts himself in the darkest corner of the darkest room, and he makes himself as far as possible away from his younger brother, who wears a sign around his neck that says, "I'm the black sheep of the family." And the thing that's different about this room of hell is that nobody has to send the older brother to that dark room of hell. He goes there all on his own. It's his choice to be there. In fact, a loving father is inviting him, is imploring him to come out of the darkness and come into a room that's filled with light and music and dancing. There's a party going on. See, there's no lock on that door. There's no bars on the window. As the eagle said, he can check out anytime he wants, and he really can leave. That it's a hell of his own choosing. It's a hell called not forgiving. So, why should I forgive my brother? Well, not because he deserves it. I mean, by definition, you can't deserve forgiveness. And why should I forgive? Well, not because I haven't really been hurt. If I hadn't really been hurt, I wouldn't need to forgive. Why should I forgive? Well, not because it will necessarily change my brother's heart. That's up to him and God. I can't control that. Why should I forgive? Well, because I don't want to stay out in the dark forever. because I'm tired of this angry little room of hell all by myself. I should forgive because there's a part of me deep inside that really just wants to come to the party. I really do. You can stay out in the dark all day if you want to, all night too, for that matter. You can be right and self-righteous all year long. You can hold on to your grudge and your hatred for the rest of your life if that's what you choose to do. Or you can let it go and you can come to God's party. The choice is entirely up to you. And the way you get to that party is called forgiveness.